Welcome to the first native session ever. It's a pleasure to see such a huge amount of people basically joining us for our first session. So thank you very, very much for coming and fighting against the weather. So yeah, pretty happy to have you here. I guess we start off with a little music first. Let me switch to the machine studio that I have here on my table. And we're going to start off with a little bit music first because I think that's the nicest way of a warm welcome, actually. So let's go. And while this thing is looping, you can basically tell your friends to come in, and we start off now. Thank you very much, and again, a happy and warm welcome to the first native sessions here today in the beautiful and lovely Prince Charles. So, native session, what is that, right? It's the first one, so let me fill you in on what native sessions is actually. It's a new community event that will going to take place regularly here in Berlin, in Prince Charles. And also maybe midterm in London, LA, and Tokyo, in our partner cities, so to say. And Native Sessions is going to gather semi-professional and professional musicians under one roof, like we do here, and bring them together also with the tool makers themselves. So what I mean by tool makers is developers, engineers, and all those people who are creating these hardware and software stuff that you can see here in the corner or on my table. So we really want to have a knowledge flow into both directions. So we want to hear your opinion and questions and so on. And also you're going to see the perspective of the developers and the engineers. Just a little side note, this event is going to be live streamed. So the stream is running at the moment. There are people sitting in front of their screens at home, and they will also be able to post a few questions that we will answer here on stage right away. Please when you think about question, it should be somehow related to the topic of today. So today's big topic is machine, a drum synth. So if you have any questions on the drum synth, please feel free to ask them through the forum or here in the audience later on right away. So the live stream is going on. If there are more questions that could be answered here on stage, please be aware. We are going to answer all the questions within the forum later on after this event. So I'm going to start off with a little introduction to what drum synths actually are and what you can do with them. And show you a little bit of the performance aspects, give you a little bit of tips and tricks when you want to use the drum synths. And later on, we will have Francisco Garcia and TJ Hertz over here on stage. And they both are developers of the drum synth modules and have programmed the basic framework which is behind all of these modules. Just a question right away. Who of you is using Maschine already and knows about the drum synths and Maschine? Yeah, okay. That gives me a little bit of an idea how to handle this today. So I hope that there will be something for the beginners, but also for the advanced users today in terms of drum synths. So, big topic today, drum synths on Maschine, as you can see here. But if we talk about that, then there's actually a much bigger topic, which is percussion, right? And you see this little Photoshop montage collage here right away, because yes, it's not started off with native instruments. It's been something going on for a couple of thousands of years now. So when we think about the use of percussion in the really beginning, it was about communication. It was about transferring some information from one place to the other and for example, warn some people. If there's a danger, people struck the drum to warn other people that might be a little bit further away and notice them. So percussion, in the end, is a form of communication. And as a matter of fact, you've just witnessed that. When I started to play, there were more and more people coming in because they received the signal that I was sending out. So I just wanted to make sure that this is actually where we are coming from. And when we're talking about percussion, we talk about a lot of different stuff. In the middle of this collage, you can see a traditional drum set with bass, kick, snare, hi-hats, and so on going on. All around this thing, you can see another bunch of percussion instruments. Every one of them sounds different, right? So, you are maybe a Maschine user already, and you say, hey, my Maschine, it can sample very good. So why don't we sample all of these instruments, and then I have them all in my Maschine, and I can play them right away. Yeah, that works until you hit a certain limit. Because samples allow you some modifications and some tweaking, so I can take a sample and I can transpose it a little bit up, I can transpose it down, filter it a little bit, but there will be some limit that I hit in terms of tweakability of this single sound. So, and this is where actually the drum synths come in, right? So the drum synth, or a drum synth, is basically like a synthesizer, like a little synthesizer framework, which is able to create a drum sound. And a really basic and simple synth circuit you can see here. So that's one of the most basic synthesizer circuits that you could use to generate a sound, especially a drum sound with an attack, a body, and a sustain curve. We will talk about that in detail later on. But so you see here a very simple diagram of what is going on in such a drum synth. We have an oscillator taking care of the tone and some tonality, and this is going to be mixed up with a noise generator that makes something like and these are mixed together, sent to an envelope generator, and this is what will create the envelope, and in the end it will sound like something like a drum. Now, when we take a look at this really simple diagram, there's the question, how can we emulate all of these instruments with only that building blocks. So yeah, that's heavy. You know, if you think about realistic instruments, realistic sounds, then you will run into trouble taking only this simple framework and creating a super realistic hi-hat or snare sound. So this framework works best for analog drum sounds. And one of the most famous examples of analog drum machines you can see here, it's the Roland 808. And this is an analog machine, analog circuits running in that, and it's doing exactly that in some kind of advanced way and giving you a range of different drum sounds that you could distinguish from each other. What I mean by distinguish it, you can distinguish a bass drum from a snare drum and so on and so forth. But I think everybody of you will agree when I say the 808 is not the most realistic emulation of a drum set. Of a realistic drum set. It's not that at all, right? And this is what we love about the 808. So for things like this, those simple circuits work beautiful. And we will have Timothy here talking about his circuits that he uses to create the electronic drum synth modules. But what about like the realistic drum sets, right? I think this won't be enough for that. We will need much more than that. And now, I will introduce you to actually a reactor ensemble that is used by Francisco Garcia, who will talk here in a minute. And we had to mystify it a little bit. So please be aware that there's some Photoshop magic going on just to make sure that you won't copy our mothership reactor ensemble that he uses to create these drum synths. But it will give you a little clue of what is going on in one of these or behind these drum synth modules. So every drum synth module in Maschine starts with one of these like reactor ensembles, and then of course nobody could use it, right? I mean, Francisco can do it because he knows what all of this is about, but I don't do. So a big task for these developers and engineers is also to boil it down into a usable shape and factor. And so this is what it looks behind the drum synths, and now take a look at this. This is how the drum synths look in the end when they are done. So here you see 9 of these modules. It's 9 different modules. Every one of them is creating another sound. So we have drum synths for kick drums, for snare drums, hi-hats, tom, percussion, and so on and so forth. So it's a long way from the initial idea until it looks and it sounds like it does now at the moment. So I think that gave you a little bit of an introduction regarding these drum synths. And I actually have a little project here that I'll load up now. And in this project, you will only hear drum synth modules sound, right? So this is a full track with melodies and stuff like that, but everything is done with drum synths. And just I try to. So, the good thing about these drum synths is that I can tweak them right away here from the machine hardware. So I have different parameters set up. And I can change the sounds while they are playing. So, thank you very much. It's almost like, it's hardly believable that all of this basically came from drum modules, right? Yeah, it just shows how versatile this is. For you Maschine users, you might have realized that there are some internal machine effects on it. So it hasn't been the bare drum synths. There have been, for example, the resonator effect for the vocoder sounds and stuff like that. But with a bunch of internal effects plus these drum synths, we can get really, really far in terms of sound, timbres, and quality. So, for example, I used this drum kit, which is which is really electronic sounding, but in comparison to that, I have this kind of kit, which almost sounds like samples, which sounds like an aim and break, but I can still change all the parameters right away from this thingy here. So let's dive into drum synth details. And for that, I go into another scene and into my tips and tricks thingy here. So let's go in here. Let's say you're at home working. You have a little playback going on and you want to create a couple of drums on top of this. First of all, we need to load these drum synths. And this is actually a question that is asked a lot. How can I open drum synths using only the hardware? Because some people start fiddling here in the software, and that's not actually necessary. There's a quick way of loading up a drum synth. I just select a pad where I want to have the drum synth at, and then I say Shift, Browse. And this will bring me to a special kind of browser where I can load up machine effects, internal effects, but I can also tweak it to instruments, and then it will give me a little selection of different drum synth modules. So here you find the kick, the snare, the hi-hat, tom, and so on and so forth. When I hit this jog wheel, it will load up the kick drum right away. And now take a look, let's take a look into the software, because this is where you will be able to see it. So here you see one of the drum synths that is loaded up, a little kick drum, a sub kick drum. Let's go on and just load up another snare right away on this one. So I have two elements going on, and last but not least, I will add a little hi-hat on top. All right, so basically loading up one of these modules is quickly done, and I've just did it right away. So let's move back to the hardware. By the way, I've also colored it, so I know which one is which. And first of all, let's create a little bass kick pattern by selecting it, going into the step mode. All right, let's take a snare on top of that. Cool. So we have something going on, a little bass kick and a little snare. The first tip and trick that I want to show you is so-called cloning. I have one single drum synth here, and I'd like to have two drum synths to get a little bit of a bigger sound. And the quickest way to do this in Maschine is, first of all, select this bass kick and put it to a little link group. I will tell you what this is in a second. And then simply duplicate one sound to the other slot. So now I have two bass kicks going on, but please take a look at this. When I trigger this pad, it will fire the other one as well. So now they are linked. This is called pad linking. And it's a little bit like in wrestling, when I think it's called clothesline, when two people team up and they make like this and then they go and hit very, very hard. So the same is true here for the pad linking. It's like two pads hitting at the same time together. Now I can go into my second version, actually, and see if I can take... So here's one single kick, and now I bring in the other one, and you will feel that it's becoming a little bit more tight and more, of course, because it's layered. Some frequencies will layer up, some others will be canceled out. But let's try to change just the second one a little bit. And so now I have a low bass kick from the first slot, mixed up with a high bass kick from the other slot, which somehow works. It's hard to tell because the speaker is facing that direction, but you will be able to tell that there's something going on. Wait a second. Solo. Layered. Right. So let's take it a step further, and this time I will add another bass kick, or let's duplicate it quickly, like we've done before. But this time I will add a sample, and I bring a sample and mangle it up with these two drum synths that are already there. So let's see if we can find a suitable sample for that. Browser, and now go to the Astral Flutter, drums, kick drum, and see this. Oh, I can only hear it here. Here we go. So that's like samples that I have already in my library, and I will just take one of them, put them on the same pad link, it's already there, and maybe tune it a little bit. All right, do you hear that like sick rumbling on below? Let's go on and take a little distortion. All right, that works. So let's do the same trick with the snare drum. This time I layer in a clap. Let's go with a hi-hat. The rain is starting outside. Again, just to take a listen at the first example, we started off with that, and we made it to that. So that's a much versatile, much more colorful kit than we had before. So let's kick in. Okay, cool. That works for me so far. Now we have this clutter around. I have 3 pads wasted for a bass kick. I have 3 pads wasted for a snare. So there's a quick way to basically resample everything onto a new pad. That's a good tip for Maschine users out there. There's a quick resampling function. So let's try to resample it. I've just selected this one pad and pressed the sampling button because I can now take the internal signals. So whatever is coming from Maschine will be fed back into Maschine and basically recorded into the pad that I've just selected. So let's try this and say start. Now it's recording, and I will just trigger the kick once and stop. And now I go to the other one and I say start and do the same thing with the hi-hat. Back to here, stop it again, and let's do it with the hi-hat as well, with a hi-hat, and start, stop. Right, so now I have basically a couple of samples with all these bass kicks mashed into each other that I could now edit right away and truncate it, normalize it, and now save it as a new sample. So I just want to give you this little workflow trick that you could use to create your own samples, Just find a couple of drum synths that match with each other, put in a sample, and then resample it. Because resampling is a really nice trick, and it's a really nice way to find new ideas. So this is the snare drum, which sounds really nice. So just save it as a sample somewhere on your hard disk and you're ready to go. So that's it for little drum layering techniques and so on and so forth. It's also possible to create a melody with a drum synth only. So let's listen to that beat. And I have this hi-hat going on here that I've used before. So let's see, with all the hi-hats on top, with all the delays. Let's turn that down, bring it here. So that's actually a hi-hat going on. What if I tweak this to memory, or to this one here, you will hear that there's a certain tone coming in. And I can tune it down. And at some point, it will become a tone. So this hi-hat can actually do some melodies as well. And last but not least, I will show you a little trick. This is really for the advanced users in here. So if you use a lot of drum synths, you will find yourself tweaking drum sounds a lot. Going in here, doing this, then maybe changing it to another engine, then try another one, and so on and so forth. You go into a next one. So that's actually requiring a lot of menu hopping. And in Maschine, we have something called macros. Macros is like a shortcut to a certain parameter. So for you Maschine advanced users out there, check this out. I have a little group, but within this group, I have set up a certain set of macros already that lets me change the engine of the sound. So I can stay here and play the drum set while I am changing sounds. So, once you've did this and saved this as a group, you can load it up in any project that you want and dial in your favorite drum sounds right away. Now, that's it for the first drum synth introduction part. And next here on stage is Francisco Garcia and Timothy Hertz. And they're going to tell us a little bit more about how to use the drum synths, about how what they did and which thoughts they had when creating these drum sounds over here. They will come on stage now. I will maybe play another tune really, really quickly. And yeah, see you guys in a minute. What up? Come on here.
Wow, too many people.
This right.
Shravan.
Hello. So, right. Francisco.
Hi.
And Timothy, it's great to have you here today to talk about the drum synths, actually, because this is your kid, actually, your little baby, right?
Kind of, yeah.
Great. So maybe before we get into the drum synths and how these things have been created and so on and so forth, could you give us maybe like a little background of yourself? How,
sure.
Like, where are you coming from, and how did you get to this developer position at Native Instruments?
Sure, yeah. I basically come from Spain, from the Canary Islands. I guess many German people know the Canary Islands. And then I was in Barcelona studying like a master about DSP development. Basically with the music technology group. You may know it because they did this React table, this kind of table that Björk was using on one of his world tours. And basically, yeah, I was learning there the whole, how to program audio, basically. And from there, yeah, I got a connection with Native, and then got the job. And actually, that was my first project in the company.
Really?
On the drums, yeah.
So that was a good start off, I guess.
Yeah, it was kind of a long project, but then the end was kind of good. So, yeah.
Thanks. TJ, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm from. Well, I grew up in the UK. I studied engineering, like electronic engineering, signal processing. Basically, applied for a job at Native Instruments as a DSP developer straight out of university. Moved over to Berlin and did a lot of learning on the job. Did a lot of putting two and two together with the fact that I'd been making music since I was a kid, and yeah, kind of a mix of.
Right. Maybe I'll drop a little side information. This guy, his artist name is actually Object, and very amazing house techno producer. So you should really check out his productions. Great.
That's a good marketing.
Yeah.
On the side.
Moving swiftly onwards.
Is there like any personal background in drumming, like especially in drums? Have you ever played the drums?
Yeah, I'm a terrible drummer, and I've played a lot in parks, you know, these kind of things, but not like a proper education on drumming. No. And then of course, yeah, playing with drum machines a lot, but acoustic drums. Yeah, can play something. If you give me now here a djembe or other book, I could play something, but not really a professional musician. It's not my thing. And yeah, with electronic drums, yeah, quite a lot.
Okay, so you're actually also more from the dance music
yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
side of things.
Yeah.
Great. And TJ, what about you and drums?
I used to be a drummer, yeah, until I was about 18 or 19. The drums were my main instrument, and yeah, I used to play pretty actively in a lot of groups, a lot of different styles, and then I basically gave all of that up and took up electronic music production instead. But I don't know, it's in there somewhere, in the background, yeah.
I think you can actually draw from all that knowledge when you're programming beats and
Sure.
programming synths, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Great. Besides you two, have there been any other people involved in the creation of the drum synth modules?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, when I arrived to the company, this project had already started. There was a great developer called Mike Dalliot. He's the guy behind Massive. I guess you all know Massive, the synthesizer. And he basically is a drummer himself, like a great jazz, African percussion, and all kind of percussion. And yeah, he had this idea of building like a acoustic drum synthesizer. And so that was part when I jumped into the company when I arrived, and then we moved the project forward, basically.
Yeah, there's. I mean, from the electronic side, from the electronic drum side of things, there's also two people spring to mind. Like a colleague called Dietrich Pang, who created a lot of the building blocks that ended up being used in the drum synths. Like the shaker performer, for example, was him, and a lot of other parts that went in. Also, Lazyfish, who is a very talented Reactor developer who made a lot of stuff in the Reactor library. Some of those components I basically stripped out and reused in the drum synths as well, and some of the oscillators as well that went in.
So maybe that's a basic understanding that I have. Like every of those drum synths starts in Reactor, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And then later on gets somehow converted into a machine-like instrument.
To C++ code.
Yeah.
So I'm getting a bit nerdy here, but
Reactor is a really convenient prototyping environment for us because you can very quickly drag the output of one thing to the input of another thing without having to worry about coding it all in C++ and making it compile and everything. So it's a very fast and immediate way of seeing whether one thing will work with another thing, one thing feeding into the next, and yeah.
Great. And when you work on these drum synths, do you join forces? So are you both working at the same drum synth at the same time, or is it somehow split?
Of course, we join forces. There is also a lot of feedback coming from sound design, from product designers. So normally, I mean, depends on what stage of the project, but normally we are showing everyone what we are doing to get some feedback and then readjust and some kind of iterative process all the time, of course.
But I think it's worth adding as well that all of the modules, and by modules I don't mean kick, snare, hi-hat, I mean the individual modes of each of these. So, for example, sub kick, I forgot what they're called, tronic kick, fractal, all of these. They're all developed independently, and most of these modules can be broadly split into two categories. Like one is the modal drums, which is what Fran was working on, and the other half were the electronic drums, which is predominantly what I was working on. So in terms of cooperation, there was obviously cooperation, but each of us had modules that we were working on ourselves.
Okay, but it's more like just to round it up. It's more that you work on the acoustic sounds, on the modal emulations, whereas you are the electronic specialist,
basically,
so to say, for electronic drum sounds. Okay, great. So where, like, in the very, very beginning, where does it start off with? I mean, is it more of a like external demand? So someone comes in and says, "Hey, we need a new kick drum module, make it," or do you have like your own ideas and stuff to bring in? So how does that work?
Well, I think it's both. I think for Machine, it was always from the users was asked to have like a drum synthesizer inside. No? It makes totally sense for a groove box like Machine. And also from our side, we thought it was really a great project to work on acoustic. From my side, at least for acoustic drums, because it's not much on the market that you can use. And it was a real challenge to get them right and usable for music production. So I think that both things, this mixture of the requirements of the users and that we were also willing to do something that is not in the market, these two things were pushing it.
I mean, the basic remit was that there was a need for a suite of several drum synths with a reduced parameter set, where you could load up one mode of a particular drum synth, and you wouldn't have too many parameters to play with, but they would sound broadly good at most settings. So if you split that up into the two kind of main categories of like acoustic sounding instruments and electronic sounding instruments, then from there it's a question that kind of gradually answers itself. You know, you need a few kick drums, and you need a kick drum that sounds like this, you need a kick drum that sounds like this, you need a kick drum that sounds like this, and maybe one that sounds like nothing you've heard before. Yeah.
Okay. What tools do you use to design all these drum synths? I've mentioned Reactor, and I visited you in your little workspace, and it looks a little bit like People at the Wall Street, because he has like 2 monitors and it's all full of Reactor ensemble, basically.
We are on Facebook all day long.
So I just call this the mothership ensemble, right?
Right, yeah.
So
yeah, maybe we should clarify that to people because they may not know. Like, I mean, for the acoustic drums, basically we build like an engine, and all the acoustic drums are based on that engine, which is the same. But then there are different. With this engine, you can generate all kind of acoustic drums, and then for the electronic drums, they are different ones, right?
Yeah, essentially.
Kind of explaining like that.
Yeah, the electronic drums, each mode is its own reactor ensemble, and it was designed from the ground up to fulfill a specific function with a specific set of parameters, like 5 to 8 parameters usually. Whereas the acoustic sounding drums, it's all part of this huge gargantuan thing, and it's basically like a really complex macro parameter arrangement.
So yeah, everything was basically first done in Reactor. Then we had many listening sessions with many different people to see if we had like the right set and also the right sweet spot. So basically every time you're turning the parameters, you find like meaningful sounds that you can use in your productions. That was a lot of work to get the right parameter ranges of the whole thing, because yeah, I mean, if you have 8 parameters, the combination of all the 8 parameters should sound okay. And that's a lot of work. And yeah, once we got like a set of modules that we were happy with, then we started porting into machine code. That was more or less the kind of the development.
that's nice. And so this ensemble that you work with, has it grown over time? So did you start off with only one module and it became bigger and bigger the more modules you've created?
Yeah, exactly. Basically, you kind of think like a percussive sound. You think like one of the most important things is the attack of the sound, no? Like the hit, how it sounds, and that's in this very short amount of time you get an idea of what kind of sound it is already. And then you have the body, which is the rest that decays, that gives you maybe the tone or the other kind of perceptions. But really the most important part was kind of the attack. And only for the attack of the sounds, we have like developed an engine, which is like a tiny FM synthesizer.
Like, which is only for the attack?
Only for the attack of the sound. And then we have like another technique for the body. For the body, we started basically analyzing acoustic samples and trying to understand how they hold partials and how they develop over time. And then we got an idea. Basically, it's like this like exciter resonator model. So basically, you have something that resonates like an acoustic instrument, and you excite it, you hit it, and then it resonates. So this kind of technique is what we were using for this body of the sound.
Okay, and that's a major difference also to the electronic modules, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Yeah, well, the electronic modules are all different. I mean, the basic difference in paradigm is that with the modal drums, you need one ensemble that can make all of these sounds. With given a different set of parameters, you can achieve wildly different results. Whereas with the electronic sounds, you just make it an entirely different model for each one. So one might just be a pretty simple oscillator, maybe a second oscillator, maybe a pitch envelope, maybe an attack module or something like that, and another one might be a completely different a completely different like topology of different components. A lot of the electronic drums are modeled on classic circuits. I mean, like the sub-kick, for example, is pretty clearly based on an 808, and the tronic one is based on a 909, and so on. But all of these things are instruments that you could only really make individually, rather than having one big mothership, as you put it, that can achieve all of these different results.
Okay, and one question that always comes up, no matter if I dive into the electronic drums in modules or the more modal ones that you did, Francisco, is like when I hit it a couple of times after, like, or it somehow seems that there is some kind of randomization factor in there. It doesn't sound the same whenever you hit it. So is there some hidden randomization going on?
Exactly, yeah. That was kind of a requirement, no? Every time you hit like an acoustic drum, it never sounds exactly the same. It's not a sample. And we wanted to run away from the kind of sample paradigm and have something that was a bit more alive. So for that, we put a lot of effort in two things. One, what you mentioned, the randomness. So every hit in this kind of exciter and resonator model. So basically, the exciter is a bit different in every hit. And also, you have some noises that change the noise character for each single hit. And then also the dynamics of the sound were also like a thing that we put a lot of effort. So basically, these acoustic drums are really designed to be played dynamically. That's one of the main goals.
So if I, for example, if I turn off, wait a second. It's here in the sound and. All right, so here you hear it. If I press it softly, there's almost no attack.
Exactly.
It's like boom, 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 and then the attack comes.
So it tries to emulate like a real drum, no? What you hit is very, very soft, and when you smash it, basically. Also, another thing was if you think of a membrane of acoustic drum, where do you hit? If you hit in the center, if you move a bit closer to the rim, these kind of things were things that we were considering and randomizing in order to have different kind of tiny difference in the sound, so it sounds more alive.
Mm-hmm. And is the same true for the electronic modules as well?
To a lesser degree, yeah. I mean, obviously part of the whole thing with electronic drums is that the sound is more consistent from hit to hit, and that's part of the very nature of synthesized drums and sampled drums in general. But there's a subtle but perceptible difference between, for example, playing 16th notes on the hi-hat of a 606 and playing one sample of a 606 hi-hat in 16th notes again and again. The difference being that, like,
shotgun effect, no?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly, yeah. So on the original synth and on the drum synths as well, each hit is subtly different. So it feels a little bit more organic, I guess. Whereas if you repeat the same sample over and over, you get this kind of machine gun effect, and it starts getting more noticeable the closer the repetitions are together. So if you have very fast repetitions of a hi-hat, for example, then it starts sounding really unnatural and really mechanical if you just repeat the same sample over and over again. Whereas if you have a synth where, I mean, the way that it works is that the oscillator that generates the tone in the first place is free running. It doesn't reset on every hit. So at the start of every hit, the oscillator might be at a different point in its cycle, which means that you still get the attack every hit, but the actual sound itself is not the same. Like you couldn't take one hi-hat and the next hi-hat and subtract one from the other and get zero. So when it comes to making drum patterns that sound like subtly a little bit more alive and a little bit less contrived, then yeah, it does make a bit of a difference to be using synthesis instead of samples.
Great. I think you made a pretty good job in bringing this like real life behavior from real instruments or analog instruments, old analog drum synthesizers within the digital realm. That's really well done. Great. There is like one special thing I like to ask you about TJ, because there's the hi-hat module, and there is a special kind of hi-hat module called the memory, and I will just go into a empty group here quickly and load up the memory hi-hat, because there's something special about this hi-hat. Right here, I have the little... Because it can sound like a 909, but there's a source parameter that lets me change somehow the sound and make it... But it's all within one module. How does that work? How did that happen, actually? How did you make this one hi-hat sound like 6 different hi-hats?
Well, it kind of comes from, I don't know, if you compare how the 808 cymbal or hi-hat generator works with how the 909 hi-hat generator works, they're worlds apart. Like the 808 is completely analog. Everything is synthesized in real time, whereas the 909 is basically sample playback. And what I wanted to achieve is the kind of control and spontaneous variation that you can get with real-time synthesis, but still being able to use the timbre and the tone that you can get from a sample like you have in a 909. So I mean,
so this is no sample.
It's kind of sampled. I mean, I'm limited in how much detail I can go into because like it's obviously it's proprietary technology and all the rest. But essentially, what it does is samples the tonality of the body of a cymbal itself. So in the case of a 909, rather than just saying here is a recording of a hi-hat, here's the attack, and it's this long, and there's your sound. My task was basically to somehow turn that into an oscillator. And if you can turn that into an oscillator, then from there it's possible to add attack to it using, I don't know, amplitude envelopes or phase modulation or FM or whatever other techniques you want. But you can also swap out the tonality while still maintaining the same, basically the same structure of the instrument itself. So when you change the, I can't even remember what the control's called, the source control, you can tell that you basically have the same instrument, but using a different sample as the source for the tonality. It's basically about turning a sample into an oscillator and using that oscillator in a configuration that works as a drum synth.
Okay, let's say there's some nerd specialties going on
For sure.
in the background here. All right, great. I think it's time for some questions. It's a live stream today, and we even have a couple of questions from our forum members here. So Samuel is asking, is it possible to use the drum synth also for other types of sounds, for example, effects sounds?
Totally.
You tell me. I mean, load one up and do this and see how it sounds.
Just mess up as far as you can go, and then
I think maybe the best
modulate it.
Yeah, maybe the best
fractal tone,
example of this is the fractal percussion, I guess.
The fractal percussion.
Yeah.
Do you want to show us a little bit?
You're probably faster on machine than I am.
Okay. Shift browse fractal percussion. This one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Because it's very broad and oh, hang on. Which one was it?
This one.
Oh no, it's the same one. Right.
Yeah,
well, there
it's
you go.
the same one.
See, I mean, like.
Yeah, so especially with these like tones when you tweak it.
Yeah, also in keyboard mode,
well.
especially if you have the key tracking mode set to dissonant rather than harmonic, then what that does is it tracks the pitch of the keyboard on only one of the 4 oscillators rather than all of them. And because it's all done with FM synthesis, if only one of the oscillators is tracking the position of the keyboard, then as you play across the keyboard, it makes all kinds of strange harmonics that don't stay in tune with themselves. So you get.
Okay,
Anyway.
so Samuel, wherever you are, I hope that answers the question. Richie asks, can I also record a movement when using the drum synth? Yes, let's try this just with the example that you've showed you before. Maybe get a little metronome. So, yes, I can record any movement by holding down the auto write button and then simply twist it. And so you see it's recorded right away. Let's do another parameter.
Can I also point something out here that yeah, one nice thing about the using this with the fractal percussion is that if you turn tune hold on, which is on the first parameter page, what it does is it locks the automation of any parameter while the note is playing. So if you were to change a parameter while the sequence is playing, rather than hearing the effect of turning the knob during the note, so you don't so getting this kind of like effect, it waits until the onset of the next note before making a step change, which makes it really easy to get like kind of arpeggiated, like sequenced sounding changes. So like for example, I don't know if
That's right.
That's with tune hold on. That's with it off.
Okay, so in the one way we can hear the bending, but if we put it on, then this will be gone. So again, Richie, just hold the auto write button and move the parameter, and it will do exactly the same thing like a sample would do in Machine. Matt is asking, I'd like to ask the devs if there has been any consideration about adding a noise drum synth. No, that's a great idea.
There's actually this POW in the snares that actually generates some noise.
The POW, let's check it out quickly.
But for sure,
snare.
I mean, when you say noise, do you mean like like that,
noise.
or do you mean like I don't know?
You can just
Russell
throw it
Haswell.
longer.
There is some noise going on. I can
sure.
hear this here.
Also, the 606 hat, whatever. What is it even called now? The analog hat. We had different names
the
for
naming
all
is
the
an
modules
issue.
while we were developing them, so we don't actually. We've kind of forgotten what they ended up getting
and
called.
Marketing names and then
In the hat that sounds like a 606, there's a parameter that crossfades the oscillator from oscillator mode to noise mode. So if you want something noisy sounding, then you can use the oscillator in there.
Maybe that will do the trick, and the power clap also can generate some kind of noise that you could take for something else. Right, Francisco mentioned it was a long project. How long did it take until the drum synths were developed, until Machine 2 came out and all of that?
Right, I mean, if you sum up, I would say around year and a half, from year and a half to 2 years, kind of, from the beginning to the actual release. I would say that's more or less the time.
So 1.5 to 2 years.
Well, I don't know. I mean, like, we spent a year and a half on them, but before that, I mean,
it was
like DJ, for example, was working on the electronic ones for a year or two before that. And then when
maybe even more,
Yeah. I spent, a year and a half, 2 years, and probably the same for you, but
So that's a pretty long time. Just let me ask, how does it look when you work? Do you have some playback going on and then you design the drum sounds, or do you just listen to the naked drum sounds 2 years long and after that?
You know when you're making a track and you're listening to a kick drum for hours at a time, trying to get the kick drum exactly right for the track, and by the end of the afternoon, you're going completely crazy because you've been listening to one drum for 4 hours long. It's like that, but for 2 years. And
we are not crazy yet.
Instead of having to get one drum sounding right, you have to get an instrument sounding right at every possible combination of 8 parameters.
But then you would put them into a context. I mean, for sure, you will be hours listening to it alone, like a kick drum or whatever, and then you program a nice beat and see how it works, and add some effects and compress it and equalize it and see how would fit into a mix, right? Because at the end, that's what people is,
But
how people is going to
yeah,
use it.
you have to be quite disciplined in like making sure you regularly test out what you're working on in the context of loops, in the context of tracks, because you just end up listening to the same sound over and over and over and over again
Your ears get
for
a
weeks at
bit
a time,
biased.
and you lose any sense of objectivity whatsoever.
Also, the listening environment, like we were listening to monitors, we were using different headphones because for percussive sounds, it does make a difference.
I don't know how you did it actually, because I worked from home for 2 years so that I could use my studio, but you did the whole thing on headphones.
I did
which
the whole
would
thing on
never have been able
headphones
to
and
do.
sometimes in the studio. When I had something that I was happy with, I was double checking in the studio. Okay, does it sound? Of course, at home. But yeah, the listening environment was critical for the attack of the sound. No, this hit at the beginning. That to get it right, you really have to try out in different listening environments to make it match everywhere, basically.
Great. Okay. Are there any questions in the audience at the moment? Yeah, we have one guy here and a microphone. Please.
Thanks. This is for Object. Did you produce your album, which is very nice? I like it. I love it. With a machine, the drums, all the drums, the whole drums from your album?
Not all the drums, the whole drums. I used the drum synths on like maybe 1 or 2 tracks at quite an early stage. My
You were sick of it already.
yeah. My production process is quite long-winded, so I did use them at some point, but that was usually when the tracks were still at a very early stage, when I was still jamming them out with Machine.
Any other drum synth related questions? Yes, please. Go for it.
So basically, you said that it's possible to create melodic sounds out of drum synths.
Mm-hmm.
Is there also a way to play them polyphonically, or is this just a monophonic module at the moment?
They're all monophonic.
They're all monophonic, yeah.
Sorry.
You could load up several drum synths and then make them polyphonic.
Exactly, yeah. You can link them.
Oh, yeah.
If you were really serious about wanting to do this, then you could find a way of making it work. But they're not designed like that, no.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Please give these guys a clap.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. The drum synths are such an essential, or has become such an essential part of Machine that I can clearly hear a signature sound only coming from the drum synth. So thank you very much for that. Speaking of signature sound, we will now move on to Alexkid from France, but now living here in Berlin. He will give us a little bit of an introduction of how he uses drum synths and about his approach to drum programming on Machine. So please welcome Mr. Alexkid. All right, I will load up the little demo over here, and please take a seat. Good night, everyone. Hello, Alex. It's a pleasure to have you here. Maybe a couple of words on Alex's person. He's been like a protagonist of the French techno and house scene since mid-90s. Kind of the house, like the home producer of F Communications. You've did a couple of albums there on F Communications. I think you've went to Earcom at some point. Pretty good at Max MSP programming as well. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your major milestones because it's such a long career.
Wow, okay. Well, I'm 40 years old now, and I started producing when I was 17, so now it's been like pretty much 23 years doing electronic music. And it's true that the evolution has been very interesting over the years. I was signed to F Communications back in '97, and I released 3 albums with them. So for those who don't know, F Communications is Laurent Garnier's label. That I don't know, they had these for about 12 to 14 years. Actually 14, I was there during 12 years. Too many questions at the same time. I kind of forgot the...
major milestones,
Major milestones. FCOM, and I would say moving to Berlin like about 6 years ago. When FCOM stopped, I moved, and I've been releasing with different labels like Ovum, Desolat, Rekids, Cadenza, I don't know, Supplement Facts, like quite a few ones.
Right, and like in this long career, there has been a lot of equipment on your desk, right, in your studio. So when did Machine actually come across?
I had Machine from the very beginning. Story is that when I was in Paris, I used to live in Pigalle. I don't know if you guys know Pigalle, but it's the neighborhood where there's all the music shops. When everyone was going and play football or hang out with their friends, I was basically hanging out and annoying the hell out of everyone in the shops to know who was selling what, who was buying what, and this is how I managed to put my hand on a lot of analog gear or hardware. And I started to have a massive passion for drum machines, especially the ones that sample. So I've been pretty much going through the main MPCs, also Studio 440s, anything that would sample SP12, SP1200. I did have between my hands. And these allowed me to have like a different approach on how every designer makes the drum machines, and also on how the sound can be different and the approach that you can have with every single machine. So this is why pretty much I'm considered like a bit of a nerd like when it comes to drum machines. And the Machine came from the beginning. I mean, I had Machine from the beginning, and I sold my MPC 3000, which I now regret. But more because of the sound than for what it can do. Because the thing is that there's like a lot of theories about MPCs. A lot of people think that an MPC has a specific groove. And actually it's not really true. People think that an MPC 60 or 3000 has more groove. It's not that it has more groove, it's that basically the way we used to edit the sounds has changed over the years. When we had an MPC, like one of the old models, before the 2000, you would edit just by the ear. So when you would tap on a pad, maybe there was like 2-3 milliseconds from your cut point that you would miss. And these 3 milliseconds is what people might call the groove, because things don't fall exactly into place. Then there is also something very interesting, is that those machines were really good because people would use them as a main sequencer for their studio. So they would generate the clock. But the problem is when computers came. A computer cannot generate a straight MIDI clock. It's impossible. I've tested it in, out, million ways. It just doesn't work. So as soon as you try to synchronize a drum machine, an MPC, it just doesn't work. And I realized that the day that I was actually synchronizing one of my MPCs, and I was like playing, and I'm like, when I was pressing play on the machine, I was like, wow, yeah, it's cool. And then synchronizing it, and I'm like, shit, it doesn't work. By itself, it works. And then when you synchronize, it doesn't work. So what I did is that I recorded twice the same thing, and then listened to the phase. If the phase was straight, you'd be able to hear actually the same kind of like phasing, the same frequency. But what you would have is like different frequencies appearing. So let's say you take a hi-hat and you layer them, it would make because the time where it would hit would be just slightly different. And because I'm totally paranoid about these kind of things, Machine actually saved me on that, because when you use audio, it's totally straight. And therefore, if it's totally straight, you can manipulate your sounds and you can shift them the way you actually want to create the groove you want, to create these accidents that you would have before with actually like an MPC that would be clocked by itself. How many of you guys and girls use actually the shifting in Machine? How many of you nudge? Wow, 3. Well, you should try that. Nudging is pretty much what can bring the groove to a track on a very simple beat. Something that is straight, like played on eighths, especially with house music. House music is, the beats in house and in techno very often are pretty similar. It's just like changing the sounds. It's pretty much like very often the same patterns. But it's just like this little shifting that those machines had before that would add this little magic. Like sometimes you hear a track and you're just like, that's actually a bit behind, but it's what gives like this kind of groove. It's what like a drummer could have, except we would loop it and we would have some kind of repetition.
Cool. And what does your current production setup look like then? I mean, Machine came across your way like really early, as you said. So at the moment, what's your production setup looks like? Do you use a DAW on top? Do you use Machine as a VST or as a standalone?
I use Machine as a VST. I use it in a very simplistic way, as a matter of fact. I really use it as like a drum module where I can just like dump sounds and re-record them straight into the software, into the sequencer. And actually, very often, I re-shift the sounds. I can shift them in Machine, but I shift them inside the sequencer. The good thing, the thing that I really like actually, and this is something that Machine brought me, is that I started creating my own kits. If you want to start like doing kits with hardware, you have to spend like quite a bit of time, you know? It's tedious. With a Machine, it goes much faster. You can drop your sounds, and then you create a kit, you just drop your sounds, and you've got like more bass drums. So the good thing is that I started working in a faster way. I've been always like super slow. I would spend days, weeks, months on a track. Now, if I spend more than 4 days, is that something is going wrong. So what I do now is that I load kits. Let's say that in a group, I would make a group like maybe with a 909 and another group just with maybe bass drums and another group maybe with hi-hats or snares. So very quickly, I can start playing. It's more about having fun. When before I would be like checking sound by sound. Is it the right sound? Is it the right? Maybe I'm going to use this one, and it would be really long. Now I just load things, and sometimes I'm just like, oh wow, actually this is kind of cool. Let's depitch it a bit, and it's really fast for me. It's like really something that has been an extra compared to the MPCs. I just maybe lack a bit the grain and the sound, even though that there's an emulation in Machine. But when you record hardware, there's always a little bit more magic, in my opinion. But as a matter of being able to layer and to bring things and to bring a color very quickly and not lose your workflow and your inspiration, for me, it's quite magic.
And you worked in a lot of genres. I mean, you did techno music, house music, also a little bit of loungy breaks and stuff like that. Are you more the step sequencer guy or more the real-time recording
Actually,
guy?
I'm more the step sequencer guy. It's weird because, usually MPCs, it's something that you're gonna just like play the groove. But it's true that I really like the step sequencer because it brings you like the flexibility that all those new drum machines have, but still with the sampling flexibility, which, I come from sampling. So there's all these, how do you call that? Step...
Grids? Or
No. When you can actually just like focus on one spot of the sequence, on one sound, and just like change. Not step motion. Forgot. We talked about it before.
Nudging.
No.
No.
Okay, my brain doesn't function right now. So whatever. It wasn't a big deal. Yeah, the fact that you can actually just like focus on one step, on one sound. Like let's say that you've got your bass drum, you program your bass drum, and you can actually like make the decay on that bass drum or the pitch on that bass drum just like longer on that specific point. This is what I actually do like with Machine, because you can do it manually. On other drum machines that sample, you need actually to go into an event page and actually start like going through the whole list, select the one, and just like edit, which is not exactly convenient for a workflow.
All right. So the drum synths, they haven't been in Machine there since the beginning, right? They have been introduced like later on with Machine 2.2. And they have a very, very distinctive sound, and I think a lot of people out there agree that this is basically becoming like the signature sound of Machine, of how Machine sounds like. Would you agree as well? Do these like drum synths give you a little bit more of a signature than samples?
Yes, I mean, they give you more flexibility. This is the thing. To answer the question before, my setup right now is like I use like a lot Machine, but I also use like other small drum machines, a lot of analog gear, and I've got like a modular with which I actually create my drum sounds, and I drop them very often into Machine to be able to have, again, the flexibility of the pitching, which is way more complicated to do with a modular unless you have like a rack that's half a wall. So the thing is that I try to have like a certain amount of samples, and then often I layer them with other electronic sounds. I mean, from the drum synths. I really like them because, especially the hi-hats, I have to say that the guys made a wonderful work. It's very interesting, synthesis for drums, because in a very short period of time, it tells a lot. In milliseconds, you know if it's a snare, if it's a hi-hat, if it's a bass drum. So there's like a lot of information contained in this very short time. So it's cool when you have a sample of that, but you cannot really go very far. And I mean, except for changing the envelope, the filter, and maybe the pitch, which is actually usually what I do with samples. It just stays very simple. My way of working is very basic. But this allows you to add like maybe something that has a bit more movement behind, that has a bit more life, and you can fine-tune it very quickly and in a very interesting way, and it adds like something a bit more sharp into the sound. I really use a lot the layering. It's something that I really, really like. And by nudging the sounds, you actually can manage to obtain a very interesting phasing between the sound that actually re-EQs the sound, as actually Boris showed you before.
And do you have any favorite modules that you use over and over and over again?
I'd say the hi-hats and it's called not circuit. It's called
This memory thing.
Memory.
But actually, we've talked with TJ about that before.
Memory for me is amazing. I mean, there's a lot of drum machines nowadays that appear that are actually emulating or that do synthesis, and I feel they're really limited. And even if I'm usually more pro hardware and analog, I have to say that I'm quite mind blown by the synthesis that the guys have made, especially, I mean, the acoustic bass drum, for me, is quite crazy. It's, yeah, I mean, I had a rock band, and recording a bass drum is a fucking nightmare. So this, I mean, all the nuance you can get, especially knowing that it's like a reactor ensemble, for me is, wow. I mean, I'm quite a bit of a nerd, but those guys are next level nerds. So to come back to the IRCAM thing, yeah, I did a bit of IRCAM, but I'm nowhere near these guys.
Right. You were kind enough to bring us a project, right? That we
Yeah,
could
sort
now-
of. But after what I saw from you guys, it's like quite. No, I mean, I can show you like a little bit like how I would work. It's something like very, very simple. Because the thing is that tonight, what you have seen is like really impressive things like layering, putting effects, compressing, having like a lot. My way of working is way more simple. I really like to load sounds, play with them, just adjust them a little bit, layer them, shift them. And it's more about finding like a moment in the groove that allows you to, I don't know, to have this thing in a very natural way. It's about surprising yourself. So often what I do is like, I load different kits and I create different grooves with them. And then I start like muting some of them. I'm realizing that, actually, I didn't need that. Or this combination of like 3 groups actually sounds quite cool. And then maybe I'm gonna take like a kit with drum synths and I'm gonna add like a few things. I really like, as I was saying, to shift the sounds, to swing the sounds like each one with a different value. And yeah, and there's very interesting things also that actually now that I'm thinking about it, that this machine can bring, is that, I don't know, do you guys like save patterns, or does anyone save patterns and just like load other kits?
Machine users.
Machine
Do
users?
you save patterns? Yes. Okay.
So, as I was saying before, I used to just like really like go for one sound, put it there. This would be a bit like the old school MPC way, because you have to edit, it's a bit of a nightmare, so you just save your project and you sample like 4 sounds and you make a bit. In a way, it's very effective. You just sampled 4 sounds, 6, you made something with this. But this allows you to have a bit of surprise. If you create patterns, and the way you assign the sounds is always the same, or let's say that you load different patterns that are assigned to a kick, and then on another group you have different patterns that have like different snare patterns, and you can just like switch the sounds. And hi-hats, actually you could have like every time 16 combinations, plus 16 combinations, plus 16 combinations. I don't know, does any one of you have my Instant House plugin on Ableton? Okay, it's pretty much the same thing. You can do exactly the same with this, and you can actually create your own. So this allows you to actually, just by switching the program, to have something new and different. And very often these surprises bring you to a place where you actually wouldn't have gone by yourself if you had programmed the whole thing from 3 sounds.
All right. Shall we just dive into the project a little bit more?
Yeah, why not?
Over here? All right.
With this one?
I will... No, actually, we can go there. And I just want to actually take this. Because there's a side chain going on. So if you speak, it will duck the actual...
Okay.
All right.
Yeah? Oh, sorry, the cap. The cap and the camera.
All right, so you have a couple of kits already running, right?
I've got some things running. But let's say if we take something and we actually create like a sound. Oh, actually, I didn't save the thing before. Okay. Wait. Usually, this is not the one we were using before. It's not the same one.
It's not the same?
Mm-mm. So we have a little problem here. Yeah, but yeah. Okay. So let's load like a few sounds. Okay.
So before we saw like how he was layering, like how Boris was layering by putting the pads in a link. I do a bit the same thing, but I actually don't link both of them like to the same pad. I actually just like really just copy one sound to another, okay? But I don't link them because I like to have them together, but sometimes I might want to have. So the thing is that we might want to have this one maybe like a bit shorter. And then here maybe we want to have hi-hats. So we're going to have a closed one here, and
Oh, so you basically copied one hi-hat onto the other slot, and then have a short and a long one.
And actually, if I recall properly, like for the it's in pad mode, we have a choke, and we switch. We make sure that one hi-hat is cut by the other by putting them into the same choke, like a 909 would do, or like any drum machine with hi-hats. So but then, actually, what I would do is like I would just technically edit like really.
So now this is only the drum synths being left?
No, there's like samples in there. Yeah.
Yes.
Test 1, 2. Der Kick wurde auf einmal lauter, wollte einfach wissen, was hat er gemacht. Snare ist anders geworden, Kick auch.
What did you change?
Here.
Qu'est-ce que tu as fait pour le kick?
Juste raccourci. I just made it shorter, basically, and pitched it a bit down.
Après ça.
Nothing. I just, like, actually, I've got, like, one sequence that just plays, like, the bass drum straight.
Okay.
And with the second one, I just syncopate it. And the thing is that here, you actually can decide, when you're, like, off the step mode, okay, we could go and we could say, okay, we're going to swing this one. Okay, so now with the hi-hats, we're going to make something that is a bit more obvious for the swing. So you can, as you can hear, like it's quite stiff. So really it's about and this allows actually to just basically, because I copied like this, to really like adjust really quickly with the step and with the things. like how I can just like level everything. I actually really like, as I was saying, like when I'm in step mode to actually select a sound. We're going to do this actually with the open hi-hats. So I'm going to select them. So you can see they're all selected here. And the thing is that we actually, when we're in step mode, when we hold the shift, we can actually change like really slightly the position, as you can see.
Can you see this moving a little bit here?
So when we're playing this, so these little delays is what changes from something being really stiff to something that has a bit more movement, because it actually creates phases between the sounds, especially when you layer bass drums and all this. If you change the starting point in the sample, you might have either like in a position of phase, either like a summing, and this, just by comb filtering, is going to create like maybe a new texture or something. It's really about trying out and about just playing around. So as you can see, I'm really not doing anything like super complicated in here. It's really like pitching the sounds, shifting them, and adding like a little bit of movement into the things.
So what's your take on quantization in general? I mean, I've saw you always start up with a step sequencer and then you manually start moving things around, right? So you're not really into quantization?
I like to quantize, like, because I mean I don't even have to quantize because I work in step mode most of the time, so it's really like straight, and this is why I shift to create like a little bit that movement. But it's true that because I love drum machines, I kind of like this machine feel, this repetitive groove that it's always technically like the same movement everywhere.
Yeah, maybe let's take a seat here. Over. And questions in the audience for Alexkid.
Not everyone at the same time?
Here you go. Please, microphone.
Hello. Yeah. A question in terms of workflow. So, are you using the internal groups a lot, or as you mentioned, you use a DAW, so machine as a VST?
Yeah.
Or routing these signals to different tracks and in the DAW and edit or edit them in the second place.
So the thing is that, I mean, if I understood properly, the question is like how I reroute like into record, or
you use more the internal routing, or
no? I actually really like technically record from the output of machine on the channel, just because it allows me to sometimes make the combination between the sounds that I already like. If I've got like hi-hats in 3 different groups, instead of like doing like 3, I mean, it's easier to just like re-record that part. So there's a lot of muting and unmuting going on.
Thank you.
That was easy.
That wasn't easy.
I'll come back.
I'm pretty sure we have another one here, right? So all right. So maybe let's take one from the forum, from the live stream going on. Mark wants to ask. I'm interested in using machine while I'm DJing. What workflow and library of synth and drums would Alexkid suggest? First of all, do you use machine while you're DJing?
No, I don't. It's big.
So
I mean, I think it can be very interesting if you want to have something that can go fast because of the workflow and because of the ability of programming things fast. I have a friend who actually does that. He uses like actually Tractor, and he's got like machine going on, like sync, and I have to say it's quite impressive, like the way the guy does it, and everything is like super tight. So what actually this guy does is that he's got like very simple kits, and he just programs like on the go to just like add to the thing. It's very interesting when you're actually DJing to keep the energy, to maybe have like a loop of hi-hats going on, because this is something that always keeps the groove going, and then when you cut it off, then you can really make a bit of a dramatic difference. And it makes also like the transitions like a bit flawless because there's like always this kind of monotone element always going behind. So it could work, but I don't do this. I'm too old school for that.
Cool. And Grant from the chat is asking, do you create drum sounds based on the key of your song, or is this something you might fine-tune later on?
I fine-tune it on every track, yes. I tune my drums. I do tune my drums. I like to do that because it's about finding something that really mixes well with the bass or with the other elements in the track, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe last but not least, a more philosophical question. What keeps your juices flowing? I mean, you've been doing this for 20 years, dance music patterns, every day. What keeps your juices flowing?
I don't know, looking for the perfect beat, as Afrika Bambaataa says. It's pretty much the same loop that we're always playing around with in house and techno. It's always like about those like little subtle differences that just, I don't know, I just love it. I'm a club kid. I grew up in, even if I'm 40, man. I just like, I go there for a drink and then I stay there for 16 hours and then I hate myself the next day and then I go to the studio and I make more beats and that's what happens.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Alexkid. Thanks, Francisco. Thanks, Timothy, and everybody from NI who made this possible. Thanks to the Prince Charles for this great venue, and thanks for the audience for coming and your attention. We will be around a little bit more, so if you have questions to ask, feel free to pick us up somewhere around. Thank you very much, and see you soon.